Oh, we needed you.
Like you.
Okay, we have 6 o'clock.
Okay, we are going to call to order our special board meeting of April 16th. And I will ask the clerk for a roll call, please.
Director Brett Eccles,
Here.
Vice Secretary Robert Uten, Secretary Arthur Perry,
Here.
Vice President Arlene Schaefer,
Here.
President Mike Schaefer.
Here, thank
Here.
you. Any late communications?
No, Mr. President.
This is a time now for public comments. Time set aside for persons in the audience to make comments within our subject matter and that are not listed on the agenda. I have no card, so I assume there's no public comments.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
I just want to self-admit, I forgot my laptop or my iPad. If it's okay with the rest of the board that I use this and it's only for the agenda attachments, I'm not texting anyone or so, but it'll be a small screen for me today.
Can you keep an eye on the scores for us?
Yeah, if I'm cheering, you'll know someone scored.
No,
Thank you.
no problem. Thanks for announcing that. Okay, let's go to item of discussion. And Scott, is that you or Marissa?
I'll start us off, Mr. President. Thank you, and good evening, Board of Directors. So as you recall, on April 9th at their study session, we presented to the board a proposed solid waste rate study for the next 5 years. The board directed staff to report back today because they wanted some additional information, some additional questions. We believe those questions are addressed in the staff report, but I'm going to turn it over to Marissa to give you some more information or a brief overview of the staff report. We also have our consultant is available for questions, and then when Marissa's done, we're happy to answer any questions you may have. So I'll turn it over to Marissa.
Thanks.
Good evening, President Schaefer and members of the board. So as Scott said, I'll kind of go over an overview of the questions that came up during the study session last week, and then the responses that staff has generated in the report. So first, there was a question on occupancy rate. What is included and why did that increase, or why is it proposed to increase significantly from the current year to next fiscal year? So the occupancy rate includes the actual cost for collection. So that is things like equipment, so the trucks, the carts. It is driver salary and wages, and then it also includes other administrative costs such as CR&R customer service and other staff. So there is a significant increase this coming fiscal year because of the 3-cart system. So with that 3rd cart, there is an addition of 2 trucks. There's an addition of 2 drivers. There's the purchase of approximately 2,300 recycling carts, and then the SB 1383 compliance factors that are in that cost. Another question was, why is the occupancy rate increasing approximately $1 each year? So after that first increase in 24-25, it does increase approximately $1. And that's just based on the assumed 5% CPI adjustment. That's the max adjustment that CR&R can request. And so that's what this increase is based on. The staff report just shows you the rate and then the 5% on top of that. Another question was, or something that the board asked us to confirm, was that the district's net to hauler rate with the proposed rate still would be within 10% of the county average. So we do have the district's net to hauler under that proposed 24-25 rate. That is $24.81. The county average is $24.79. 10% on top of that is $27.27. So that does place the district within 10% of the county average as required by contract. Lastly, the board did request that we remove references to the recommended 35% reserve target that was mentioned in the rate study. So we did remove any references to that recommended 35%. The study and the rates only reflect the board's 30% reserve target. And the amended report and presentation are attached to the staff report. That summarizes the questions and responses, and we're now available to answer questions.
Okay, I had one real quick question on the occupancy rate. we talk about the included costs and things.
Mhm.
We know that at least in the initial phases of the rollout, we are going to have, as well as CRNR, some, I guess I'll call them compliance costs. With having people out in the field checking and doing all that. Have we included, I don't think that's a huge amount of money, but is that included in this as well? Maybe
It-
under the administrative cost?
Yes, it is included in the projected or the proposed rates.
You know what we're proposing in terms of folks on the street doing this stuff? Do we know?
Like, what is the portion of the rate that is allocated just for that, or?
No, more, are we gonna have 15 people doing it? Are we gonna have 3 people doing it? Maybe CRNR knows that.
So we have a dedicated sustainability specialist. I don't know if there's additional staff that would be accompanying them on their route audits, but that sustainability specialist is dedicated to the district, so they would be out.
That-
And they are already out inspecting.
That would be a certain Mike Carey out there doing this.
No.
No? So, okay, but you're prepared for that. You've got those costs built into what we've been talking about, I assume.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. So just a general question, maybe CRR can address her staff, either one. The occupancy rate increase, I appreciate the explanation of the 5% in there. Are those fixed for the life of the 5 upcoming years?
So the 5% is assumed for every
Assumed,
year,
right.
but that is something that will come to the board and then you will approve up to 5% each year.
Now, I guess, even with or without the 5%, the base rate, is that gonna be fixed for the next 5 years? With the 3 carts and all the added costs and things like that?
So I believe you're asking, other than the fluctuation for the CPI, is it fixed?
Correct.
So the only adjustment should be the CPI increase.
Okay.
I just wanted to reiterate that although we put the 5%
Inter-
for our contract.
For the record, just tell us who you
Oh,
are.
I'm sorry, Julie Beretta, CRNR.
Thank you.
This, even though we project for a 5% maximum, we will only submit for the actual CPI index that's part of the agreement, which ends in the month of February every year before we submit. So
Okay.
this year it's trending in the 3% range. But that way, at least for the Prop 218, the
Sure.
district is covered for the 5 years and that we would only request the increase of the actual CPI.
Okay, got it. And then, I have to imagine there is some surprises from Sacramento and all the other stuff. We're not gonna necessarily have to come back and say, you know what, hey, we were wrong on our estimate on additional salaries, additional trucks because Sacramento did this. I guess what I'm getting at is 2 years from now, could this occupancy rate drastically change because of something that happens up north?
I don't think so. I mean, this is what the new legislation is asking for. I think that the only thing that could change, so it's not going to change your base occupancy rate based on the number of trucks and the 3 cart system that we have. They couldn't come back and say, we need you to do more enforcement, which again, that portion of it's very little. It's like, I think it was 89 cents. It was less than $1 that we put in to do all these lid flips and all the record keeping and all the documentation that the state requires. That would be something nominal that I would see that could, but we would come back with a full proposal, the legislation, and again, that would be for the board to decide. It. Who knows, it could be something that the district decides they want to do internally. Not necessarily have us do it, but the district might want to do it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a few other questions of staff, but since you're standing there, you guys have anything?
With the recent mandates from the state for affordable housing and I can't remember, 88 HC, whatever that HCD, or whatever where the state is proposing or mandating additional units be built. That should be in Costa Mesa, maybe 6% or say, isn't that going to have a minimal effect on you
It
guys?
should be very minimal. And then again, we've had this conversation with several of our jurisdictions about, well, do you require them to get their own set of carts?
Right.
Or if the property manager or the property owner builds an ADU on the back, They might just say, hey, I'm paying the trash bill, so I'm just going to add an extra set of carts and I'll pay for it on mine. So it's not a separate house.
The resident takes
The
the
resident could do
responsibility
it.
to pay
They
for it.
could do it. But that's something we've been talking about with many cities is how do we want to address this?
Right.
At this point, we're looking at direction from the jurisdiction, or in your case, the district, to see if you want to handle it any different or set up any requirements up front that says, no, I'm okay with it. It could be the granny house in the back. And they might say, hey, you know what? We just really need extra recycle cart because we have more cardboard, but we're okay on the trash side. So just add a recycle cart, not necessarily having to add the 3-cart system.
The questions?
Question now, is 2 trucks adequate for our district?
It is. It is. Yeah, technically we're actually shifting some from the trash also, but we still needed to buy the 2 additional trucks. Or the mixed waste, I should say, from the mixed waste routes. One of those is shifting over actually, but we still had to buy 2 new trucks.
Something you just mentioned about having to reduce the mixed waste. Any idea what you're looking at reduction wise there?
Hard to say. The only thing I was thinking that we could evaluate maybe a couple years in, going back to Director Eccles' question is, we bill you differently than we bill all the other cities. We bill you the occupancy rate, and then the district pays the actual landfill, recycling, and organics. It's possible that's where we're going to see the change. So that this will be at the fixed cost, if you will, for the year. So it'll be the 1736, but will fluctuate possibly, and we hope that your landfill will go down quite a bit, and you'll see the adjustment in your recycling organics costs.
Yeah, my thought process was the mixed waste stuff going to the landfill, we should see a marked depreciation in that. I mean, if people are fully recycling the stuff they put in that mixed waste cart now, we're gonna get it over there, but the landfill costs, and that's independent of whatever the landfill operators decide to charge, of course, but we should see that tonnage go down.
I will tell you, I just did a presentation. I don't remember if I shared this detail, but I did a presentation to the Midway City Board last month, I think it was. We were there and we did a characterization of their trash carts, and still 50% of what was in the trash cart should be in the recycle or the organics.
50%.
So 50% of what was in there was 53% was trash, and the remaining should have been in the other 2 containers.
That's more than significant as far as I'm concerned. Okay. Bob?
I had a question on, the occupancy. I found some data that shows minimal increases in single-family houses. I could show you the graph. I can't find it again. But so then what I did, and I looked back at 2015 and 2020 data, because that was what this data is. And what CRNR is charging us for. And it's almost double what, what the data shows for Costa Mesa. So I think we need to ultimately look at that.
I'll defer on staff. We had presented some stats. I'll defer to Marissa to take that.
Yeah, so I can speak on the occupancy rate and how occupants are added and how we verify. So staff receives calls from either new developments, so owners of new developments, or multifamily properties with 4 or less units that are requesting to transfer from bin to cart service. So we're processing those requests here. We're collecting the prorated fees for the first year. And then we're sharing that information with CRNR, asking them to create an active account. When we get that occupancy report each month from CRNR, I'm verifying that what's on that report is what we've given them to add, and that there's nothing there that we haven't asked them to start service for.
Really probably don't have an issue with CRNR. I'll talk to you. I'll show you show you how I came up with my data.
So all those, I'm sorry, so all those places, you're thinking back on what Costa Mesa has built over the last several years. I don't think there's a dozen single-family homes that were built unless it was a tear down and, right?
We are seeing more ADUs. or bin service that's switching to cart. So they're already there. It's just they're switching service.
So like, I think back in Costa Mesa over the last couple of years and the places that were built, okay, along Placentia, along Harbor Boulevard a little bit, and some others, you know, the 4-story, whatever they're called. I mean, what do they call them in New York? Brownstones or whatever. Those folks may have started out with a bin or with a large bin, and they've requested now to go to individual carts.
Correct.
And
And
that
we are
affects
seeing more of that,
These guys.
right?
Okay. Yeah,
Arts, residential service.
but those are single that's about the only single family developed that I can, big single family development that I could think of recently. I mean, we're gonna see some changes maybe at Fairview Developmental Center. That's gonna be a big one. I don't know what's planned for the north end. I think the Segerstrom family wants to keep their lima bean field or build an office complex or something along there, but that would be the only area that I could see us building single family tracks. I don't know about you, the east side, I don't think, there's nothing over there that I can think of.
That's 10 years out.
At least, yeah, I believe so.
Back to the bins versus the carts, how many have we processed? You know,
I can get you an actual number, but I know in the last few weeks, I think I had 3 or 4 4-unit developments that wanted to transition from bins to carts. It is right now because Newport Beach and Costa Mesa are kind of ramping up their compliance for commercial accounts. And so if it's a commercial account, but really they fall under residential service, then they're making those transitions. Or sometimes people just look at the cost, or they've had trouble with the bin provider and they want to make that transition.
We see anything going the other way?
No, I haven't
People
seen
aren't
anything.
saying, I don't want to do all this. I don't want to have all these individual bins in my garage or wherever they put them.
Some people might not want the bins, but we can't.
But we're
can't-
not seeing
No.
any trends or anybody going the other way.
no.
So I can speak to that because I manage our sales team for the open market, as Marissa said, in Newport and in Costa Mesa. And so we have an issue with space constraints. So a lot of these multifamily or fourplexes, they have one enclosure. And so with having to add the 3 different streams of waste, they just don't have space for them. And again, because of all these compliance numbers, commercial costs are also going up. And so they're finding it to be cheaper, better for the budget to go to a cart system. So there is a lot of transition in both cities that we are experiencing.
will they get those carts out to the street for pickup or do they have to drive in to get them?
A lot of times for those, they'll put them in the enclosure and the driver will drive in and pick them up out of the enclosure, just like they would have been. Because there's just no way. I mean, the alleys are long for them. There's no space in a lot of these areas. There's so many cars parked, there wouldn't be anywhere for them to put the cart.
Some of the units though, they'd have to back out. That's a potential problem. Have you seen that?
New development, that's what we had to do for quite a while. It
They
was-
do it here, HQ. If you look at our enclosure, it's all carts and then they back out. They do it here.
There's a lot of that on the east side too, the smaller, right over by Santa Ana
Yep.
Country
We
Club.
tried to
Yeah,
back
like
as
the
minimal
stage,
yeah.
as possible, but
Back out?
I know, yeah. But they have cameras on all their vehicles. They can see backing out.
They have to back out. Do they have a driver and a rider just by
one
themselves?
driver, just one by themselves. So, but they have the beeping, the trucks automatically, when they go into reverse, there's a beacon, it flashes, and there's the loud beeping sound when the truck's in reverse. But unfortunately, yes, we'd like to be like the postman at all times and only make right turns, but for us, we do back out quite a bit on busy streets.
Always a problem. Go ahead.
And I lied, I've got one more for you, or I'll throw it out to whomever could best address. So you mentioned Newport, and while they're similar, I know they're way different too, but where are you at? Because they've had the 3 carts now, at least for a year or 2, whatever it may be. Where are you at with them with cost increases for compliance and all of that?
So we renegotiated that contract in 2019, went into effect 2020 during COVID. And their rate is, I believe, a little bit higher than what we proposed. It's 26. I can't remember the exact number. Hold on, I might have it here.
And while you're looking, so along with that, so in 2019, you proposed a higher rate than what they had for this plan. And their rate right now, based on the result from the staff report, will be lower than ours, the proposed rate tonight. Am I correct in that?
The net to hauler rate, we are lower than the Newport Beach.
Right.
The overall rate, yes, we are a little bit higher. You also got to understand Newport Beach has a transfer station.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some cost savings on there on that end, so they don't have to travel as much. So there's different, it's not quite apples to apples. So there's a little bit difference. You got to take that in consideration.
And then I guess, so going back to you then, so in 2019, you proposed it. How long do they have before maybe another hit that
Every July, they get an adjustment.
they get an adjustment every July?
Every-
So in theory, they might adjust their customer rate in the next year or
so-
two.
If your performance measurement reports, every quarterly, we'll give a report. I know I do it on the sewer side. We can start doing it on the trash side as well, as comparing all the agencies' rates, and we can do it like every 3 months, or every 6 months, definitely every year. Here's where we are, here's where we stand for the other organizations. We could definitely do that.
Okay, because at this point, and correct me if I'm wrong, but reading the staff report, right now, let's say we're in the bottom third of overall rates with comparable jurisdictions. The proposed will be number 4 or 5. Am I reading that correctly?
So this is showing our proposed rate along with the actual 24-25 rates if they're available. And then a 3.5% assumed CPI adjustment if the rate is not available. So this should be as accurate a picture as we can give for fiscal year 24-25 rates, and then where we place on that.
And that, yeah,
We don't know, we still don't know what all those cities that way.
So if CR&R had the data, they provided that.
Yeah.
If not, we're assuming a 3.5% CPI, but we don't know what it will be, but we're just assuming that to show you potentially what their rates could be.
But I mean, even assuming the 3%, we could get surprised, and with 1383 compliance, all those others are gonna inch up as well, I would assume.
well, now was my question to you on Newport then. If you already negotiated this, I wouldn't think a drastic jump for them.
Yeah, the ones we know for sure, I get.
Mhm.
But I mean, some of those other ones,
Irvine just went to council in March, and they did a 4-year step up. So this is their rate effective April 1st. It goes up another $1.56 next year, and then another $1 and change for the next 4 years.
Okay.
So that was something they approved. We are currently in negotiations with Laguna Hills and Lake Forest. Those rates will be going up effective July 1st. I know Tustin's going out to bid, and Los Alamitos, their rate goes up in July. We estimated 3.5%, but not exactly.
Okay.
They have very little residential. It's mostly all commercial in that city. It's a little hard to compare that one apples to apples.
sure, yeah. Okay. But Placentia must have a lot of trash. They're the highest for such a small town.
So if you look, they have a lot of franchise fees. I think their franchise at 20%. So that,
But-
One of the-
yeah, that's why they're so
Placentia?
expensive. Yeah.
Really?
Hmm.
Okay. Oh, there you go. Okay, what other questions? Anybody?
And then just one back to staff is, at least I felt looking at a 2 or a 3-year rate adjustment, still 5, but still recommending going with 5 and not the 2 or 3, or,
That is
All over.
still, yes, NBS and staff's recommendation.
and is that primarily due to the cost of a Prop 218 hearing?
No, so that is one of the factors, and I can maybe turn it over to Jeremy to expand on that, but there were some other considerations as far as reserves and then having to increase the rate significantly again a few years down the line, but Jeremy, if I could turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Marissa. Jeremy Tamargo with NBS. Good evening, Mr. President and members of the board. Yeah, so as Marissa said, there's certainly the consideration of the additional external costs to both conducting another rate study in 2 years, but also in terms of the costs associated with the noticing, as well as kind of all those related to the Prop 218 process. The other piece to consider is that in recommending a structure that only adopts rates for 2 years, because of the fees being on the tax roll, the recommendation is to have higher rate increases than what we're seeing over the 5-year period, just because of the uncertainty with the Prop 218 process, making sure those adjustments would be included in the on the property roll in the 3rd year through the 5th year period. The other piece of that is having more drastic increases in the first 2 years. It doesn't keep the reserves on target in terms of those annual increases with the reserve targets increasing. So what happens is after the 5-year period, you would need a rate increase higher than the assumed 6% that we were looking at out in the 5 to 10-year period, based on the recommended structure that we have here over the 5 years. So in summary, there's a lot of reasons why the preferred alternative is the 5-year plan. And I would just share again that these in the rate noticing over the 5 years, that's setting ceilings in terms of the maximum rates each year of the 5-year period. As was alluded to, we're assuming that 5% CPI adjustment in the CR&R rates. And so if that is less than the 5%, in turn, the district will have the opportunity to adopt a rate that is less than the assumed maximum for each of those 5 years. So while it is setting ceilings, it doesn't mean that the board necessarily has to adopt up to that maximum each of the 5 years for the rate study period.
Which just one on the flip side of that, yes, okay, we'd come back a couple of years, things are a little bit better, we could lower it in theory. What if though, during this 5 years, I mean, all heck breaks loose and it's like these projections, I trust you, the analysis is there, but things go the other way and go haywire and now we're in a hole.
Sure. I mean, we certainly, in building these ceilings, right, in terms of the preferred alternative, we are being conservative, right, assuming that maximum 5% CPI increase, for instance. So as far as we can, we feel comfortable with that this is conservative in assuming those projected costs, but you're absolutely correct. If something unforeseen happens in year 4 of the study, then certainly we would recommend then to go out for a new rate study and adjust those rates appropriately. And part of that is setting those, making sure we're hitting those reserve targets so that the district has those reserves to deal with that. But certainly if there's something that was unforeseen, then the recommendation would be a new rate study to help to mitigate those impacts of that unforeseen situation.
And then last thing so on the reserves,
Mhm.
I completely understand on the wastewater side of the house, but on the, solid waste, can you just give me the elevator pitch as to, we're really concerned about the 30% reserves on our solid waste side of the equation?
You're asking why we maintain a minimum 30%?
I understand why to maintain a minimum, but where we come up with 30 and how this is all factored in.
That was a board decision, and it's way back when,
Yeah.
I don't remember what it was, but again, that's a policy decision made by the board, so we're just sticking with policy.
Okay, all right,
By the board.
thank you.
Policy can always be held up for discussion at some future date. I mean,
You're the policymakers. If you want to go 35%, 25%,
I
it's up
knew
to you.
I knew you were gonna say that. Okay. Other questions, anybody? Okay, so at this point, we're simply providing you direction to bring this back to the board meeting next Monday.
That was our intent, but the board was comfortable bringing it next month until we answer these questions to you. Hopefully, we fulfilled that obligations, and I'm seeing Director Echols nodding his head. So I think if that's good with the board, then we will proceed coming back on Monday with your adoption consideration and giving us authority to proceed with a Prop 218.
So our approval or disapproval, whatever, on Monday will get you started on the 2-8. That's the
218 process.
beginning of that
Yes.
whole process.
Yes, we
right?
can get the notices out and mailing in time within the 45-day window.
Jeremy, did you have anything else to add for this evening, or you okay?
I'm great. So if you have additional questions, I'm certainly happy to answer, but I would say that Marissa as well as Julie provide all the answers to the questions. So feel free if you have additional questions, but nothing else to add if you don't.
I appreciate that. So at this point, we're at the direction stage. You have the direction. Anything else? Go ahead.
Because I don't want to surprise anyone. I appreciate the questions brought back and answered, but I'm not going to spring this at this. I mean, I've got some thinking to do over the next few days, which is what we're talking about. I'm not sure, even with the answers provided, I'm 100% supportive of the exact plan that's being proposed. So I'm just throwing it out there that I'll be doing some research, but the questions and answers, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
And I'm glad we took, it's an inconvenience for everybody to have to do a special meeting, but we appreciate what you guys have done and what staff's done so that we can isolate this, because it is probably the most important thing we do. So, okay, anything else? Absolutely. I forgot to ask, or I forgot to direct public comments, so let's, before we adjourn it.
Oh, yeah.
Ask away.
And this may not even be a question that you guys can answer right now, but I would like you to consider it and answer at some point. And my question is, with the trajectory that the rates appear to be going, everything appears to be going, and with the introduction of the new carts, I know right now everything is flat rate. But at some point, is the board willing to consider going to tiered rates based on size? So we are actually charging our residents for their consumption and we're not subsidizing people with a huge amount of waste and trash and organics versus the little old lady that has one little tiny bag of trash. I know there's a lot of people I know are interested in that. And I'm just curious if that at some point could be a possibility. I know the district doesn't have the computer technology for that. And I know that's a speed bump, but that's my question. So
I think in my discussions with the general manager, I know it's on his radar and it's not something we've shut the door on. Absolutely. I mean, I think knowing the five of us, anything we can do to help our residents and ratepayers, we're going to look at it. So no, we haven't closed, and we will.
Want to address it?
Absolutely.
Thanks for, yes. So the good news is that CRNR is doing an inventory control on all the cart sizes of all the residents. That's going to greatly help us look at doing a variable rate study. And so my goal is possibly coming back in 26, 27 to consider variable rates. And if that's the case, then we have to do another study, but yes, in the near future, we are looking into that.
okay, great. Thank you.
And I think some experience that we gain with this transition will help us make that decision eventually. So why not? It does. It really does. Okay. Oral communications, any director comments? All right. Seeing none, I will adjourn the meeting to our board meeting on Monday, the 22nd. Okay, we're adjourned.
Yeah.